Hi guys, it's Jess from Honest Fiction and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be sharing my top 10 favorite romance books of all time. Alright guys, so although I only started reading romance 2 years ago, I've checked on my Goodreads and I have read well over 250 romance books. So in today's video, I am going to be sharing my top 10 absolute favorite romances. I will say there's a decent mix. We have some dark romance, taboo forbidden romance, contemporary romance, emotional romance, and this list is liable to change as the year progresses. I'm like always finding new favorites, but for the most part, these are my absolute favorite romances. And if you are new to my channel, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram and Goodreads, both linked down below. With all that out of the way, let's talk about my favorite romances. Alright guys, so these books are in no particular order, but I am going to start off with a book I feel like I don't talk about very often, and that is Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. So this was the first historical romance I ever read, and I absolutely loved it. We are following Bennett, and at the start of the story, we meet Bennett. She is this teenage girl that is being raised by her mother. Now, her mother is a lady of elite society and is also trying to raise Bennett to be very prim and proper. However, Bennett's father is actually a pirate. So Bennett really looks forward to the days that her father can come and visit, although that is not very often. And unfortunately, a very tragic event occurs at the beginning of the story, and Bennett decides to run away from home and become a pirate herself. So Bennett ends up becoming this very revered pirate, and she marries another pirate named Priest. Now, we don't know what happens in their relationship, but really at the start of our story, Bennett is fleeing from Priest, and she's trying to stay away from him. Unfortunately, she ends up being captured by the pirate hunter Ashley, and that is really where our story starts. I loved this. First of all, so much action and suspense. It definitely has that Pirates of the Caribbean, pirate vibe. I love pirate romances. They're one of my favorites. Also, the steam and the angst is just spot on. It is so good. And I also just loved Bennett as a character. So for the majority of this book, she is a captive. However, she makes it known that she is not going to put up with anybody, especially Ashley. And I just loved the romance in this book. So overall, this was a 5-star read, and I highly, highly recommend. And the next book was one of my favorite reads from last year, and that is The Words by Jade. So I was never the biggest fan of rockstar romances. However, I love this book, and it is a rockstar romance, and it is absolutely amazing. So we are following Phoenix and Lennon. So Phoenix is this troubled kid. He has a horrible home life, and he's pretty popular in school, and all he really wants to do is become a famous musician. Now, he is struggling in school because he does have dyslexia, which I absolutely love. Not the fact that he has dyslexia, but the fact that we get a book that has dyslexia representation. I feel like I never see that, and I loved it so much. So good. So anyway, Phoenix is struggling in school. So his teacher ends up assigning him a tutor, and the tutor is Lennon. Now, Lennon is this girl that is kind of picked on because of her weight in high school, and her father is a famous composer, and Lennon is crazy talented when it comes to songwriting, and she really just wants to fit in. So her and Phoenix end up, after they start working together, become friends, and that friend slowly turns into a more romantic relationship until Phoenix does something absolutely terrible to Lennon, completely betrays her, and they lose touch. That is until Phoenix, after becoming a very famous musician, manager calls Lennon and says, hey, we need you to babysit this guy. We will pay you whatever you need. And that is really where the story starts. And I loved this so much. I loved seeing Lennon and Phoenix have to deal with each other, even though Lennon absolutely hates him at the start of this, and then Phoenix just kind of feels bad for what he did to her. So it kind of has a little bit of pining, but not really, because he's really stubborn. And I loved this story so much. And this is a thick book, and I read it in a day and a half. Absolutely loved it. Once again, check trigger warnings, but highly, highly recommend. All right, so this next book is super taboo and definitely will not be for everyone, and that is Credence by Penelope Douglas. So a lot of you already know what this story is about. We are following Tiernan, and she is just unloved. Her parents do not really care about her. They only care about themselves. So they have shipped her off to live at different boarding schools and have just never been very present in her life. Now, after a tragic event, Tiernan ends up becoming an orphan and is shipped off to live with her step-uncle and her 2 step-cousins, who she has never met before. And the story goes from there after they all get snowed in together. So I will say, this is very spicy, it is very dark, very taboo, definitely check trigger warnings. However, I absolutely love this. I loved watching Tiernan slowly learn how to love because she is just starved for love at the start of this book, and also kind of figure out how to be in a family. Now, once again, I said this already, it is very spicy, know that going in, but I loved this story. It is my absolute favorite Penelope Douglas book, so I think if you've read other books by them, you will definitely enjoy this. This is like just slightly better for me than Birthday Girl, although I also loved Birthday Girl. But overall, this was such a good book, and I highly recommend if you have similar reading taste to me and you think you would enjoy it, definitely try it out and pick it up. Alright, so continuing with taboo romances, next up we have Twist by Lucia Franco. So this is the 5th book in the Off Balance series and my absolute favorite in this series. If you are unfamiliar with Off Balance, we are following Adriana. Now at the start, I believe Adriana is 16 or 17, and all she wants is to become an Olympic gymnast. Now her father has a friend who's a coach, so she ends up flying out there and ends up being coached by Coach Kova, and it is Kova and Adriana's relationship. So definitely check trigger warnings, and I will say there is a significant age gap between Kova and Adriana, and also Kova does have some authority over Adriana. He's pretty much her guardian while she is learning at his gym. So if you're not a fan of that, I don't recommend picking this up. However, I could not put this series down. It is so toxic and so messy and impossible to look away from. I loved Adriana and Kova, and really there's a lot of character growth. I feel like at the start of this, almost up until book 4, I despised Kova, and then slowly you start to kind of understand his motivations, and by the last book, I was absolutely in love with him. It also has chronic illness representation, and it was just such a good time. So I highly recommend picking this up. If you're a little nervous, definitely check trigger warnings, but it was so, so good. And next up, we have Stay With Me by Nicole Fiorina. So I just finished hosting or co-hosting a read-along of this series with Tori from Novel Life, and I honestly enjoyed this book even more the second time around. So the story is following Mia and Ollie. It's a contemporary romance, and at the start, Mia is this teenage girl, I think she's 17 or 18, and she has been diagnosed as a sociopath. So she has learned to completely turn her emotions off, and she's kind of driving her family insane because she is making very, very poor decisions. So her father ends up sending her to a reformatory college in the UK. So when she gets there, she ends up meeting Ollie Masters. Now, Ollie Masters is the exact opposite of Mia. He feels emotions too deeply. He's very empathetic. And Ollie, or this first book, is really just Ollie trying to heal and help Mia. And it is their romance. And it is so good. Ollie is the perfect cinnamon roll, nice guy, and I absolutely adore him. So this is one of my favorite series or romance series of all time. I highly recommend. This first book is really just Ollie healing Mia. The second book is reversed, or Mia healing Ollie, and the third book is the book together. I will also say all of the books end on a cliffhanger, so know that going in, but this is just so much fun, and I highly, highly recommend. Next up is Exodus by Kate Stewart. So this is the second book in the Ravenhood series, and it is very, very difficult to summarize this series without giving away spoilers. I actually have a spoiler-free review video that I will leave in the cards and in the description if you want to see me struggle to explain what this book is about without giving away any spoilers. But the second book in this series is absolutely my favorite. It is also emotionally devastating. So when you read this, have tissues ready. You will cry. I don't know anyone who has read this book and hasn't cried. It is so, so good. But we are following this girl. This is going to be a very, very vague summary. We're following this girl, and she is going to work with her estranged father for a year. And when she gets there, she meets this guy named Sean, and they end up becoming friends. And Sean kind of brings our main character into his world, and it goes from there. And it is just an amazing story, and it is so, so good. And I'm sorry I can't give specifics because I feel like any specific I try to give is going to be a spoiler. But anyway, highly recommend, definitely pick this up. One of my absolute favorite romance series of all time. So this next book holds a very special place in my heart, only because it is one of those books that made me feel every emotion imaginable. I was so frustrated with these characters, but also wanted the best for them. And it was such an amazing read that after I finished it, I had to take a day to process everything, get through my emotions. And that is No Tomorrow by Carian. So this is actually a rock star romance, and we are following Piper at the beginning of our story, and she's just working a normal day-to-day job, and she goes to the park to eat her lunch, and when she's eating, she sees this guy playing guitar with his dog. And right away, Piper has this instant attraction to this guy. So she goes up, strikes up a conversation, and we actually find out that his name is Blue and he is homeless. And that honestly doesn't stop Piper from pursuing a relationship with Blue. So it is their story spanning 14 years. And through those 14 years, Blue really puts Piper through it. But Piper also, it's so good just because you will get so frustrated with both characters. I know I did. But I still absolutely love them, and I love the relationship. And even though there were times where I felt it would be better if they weren't together, there was this little piece in the back of my mind saying they belong together, they're like soulmates, and it was just such a good read. Highly recommend. One of my favorite rock star romances. Next up, we have The Bully by Sophie Lark. This is the third book, I believe, in the Kingmakers series. So if you're unfamiliar with the Kingmakers series, it is following the children from the Brutal Birthright series, and the Brutal Birthright series is a mafia romance series. So the Kingmakers series is following these children, and they all attend a Hogwarts type school, except instead of learning magic, they learn how to be really good in the mafia. So they learn how to make poisons and become spies and just lead people and learn how to kill really well, and it's just such a fun series. But The Bully is by far my favorite because of Dean. So the story is following Kat and Dean. Kat is this girl who really didn't even want to go to Kingmakers. I think she wanted to be an artist, but because of her father, she ends up being forced to go there, and that is where she meets Dean. Now, Dean was in the prior books, he was always the villain, and he is just really antisocial. He really does likes to keep to himself, and he ends up blackmailing Kat, and Kat ends up becoming Dean's submissive, and it is their relationship, and it is so good. It is so, so good. Highly, highly recommend. Definitely pick this up. I absolutely loved it. By far my favorite Sophie Lark book, absolutely no question. And it does have a little bit of BDSM. I just loved Kat because Kat is this very innocent character, but also she's very dangerous because of things she did in the prior books. So I loved Kat, and I also love Dean because Dean really does heal throughout this book. He learns to love another person, and it's just amazing to see him go from this cold-hearted villain to a romantic lead, and I just absolutely love this. Could not recommend this book anymore. All right, so this next book is another age gap romance, and it seems like people either really love it or really hate it. I absolutely loved it, and that is The Confidence of Wildflowers by Micalea Smeltzer. So I am kind of cheating. This is a bind-up of 2 books, and it is following Thayer and Salem. So at the start of the story, Salem is this young girl. She's about to graduate high school. She's working in her mother's shop. She's been dating the same guy pretty much all of high school, and she just doesn't know what she wants to do with her life after she graduates. Well, then Thayer moves in next door. He is a single father architect, and he asks Salem to help babysit his kid when he's at work. So it is their love story, and it is so good. I absolutely loved Thayer and Salem together. I love the way that Thayer is very protective of Salem. He actually builds her a gym at one point in his basement so she doesn't have to run outside in the dark. And I just loved this story. I will say, there is a very upsetting scene that happens at the end of the first book that was very tough to read. So definitely check trigger warnings. Make sure you're okay with reading it. But overall, I just really, really enjoyed this story. One of my favorite age gap romances and one of my favorite couples. And last up is Inked in Lies by Giana Darling. So honestly, I recommend you read the entire Fallen Men series. It is my absolute favorite motorcycle club series. It is so good. I think I binged the entire series in a week. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's Inked in Lies. So this is Nova and Lila, I believe is her name's story. So at the start of the story, Lila is this young girl. She has an older brother, and she likes to play with the kids next door, one of them being Nova. Now, something happens with her family that her and her brother end up moving in with Nova's family, and she ends up developing a huge crush on Nova. So Nova ends up being a part of this motorcycle club, which means that Lila, like a little sister, tags along all the time. And it is forbidden, age gap, kind of step-sibling romance. And it was addicting, and it was so good. And I love Nova and Lila together. He calls her his flower child because she's kind of like a hippie. She loves tattoos and flowers. And I loved their story. It was so good. And it was also more emotional than I was expecting. And I will say the writing in this, I feel like, is the strongest out of all of the Fallen Men books. So highly recommend. I absolutely love the Fallen Men series. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Those are my top 10 favorite romances of all time. Please let me know in the comments below if you have read any of the books I mentioned. Also, what is your top favorite romance? I'm very curious. And I said this already, I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week.